tonight to talk about Sonder. S-O-N-D-E-R, Sonder. It's a noun, defined as the realization that every random passerby is living a life as vivid and complex as your own, populated with their own ambitions, triumphs, sorrows, and worries, hundreds of thousands of stories that are being written simultaneously around your own awareness, stories in which you might only appear once, as a blur of traffic passing on the highway, or as a lit window at dusk, hundreds of thousands of lives that you'll never even know existed. And it isn't until you start listening to those around you that you'll begin to discover the wonderful and beautiful and effervescent lives being lived around your own. The art of storytelling is an oral tradition that predates written language and is able to elicit such powerful feelings in everyone who chooses to participate. I've walked in tonight a complete stranger to most of you, and in the spirit of my favorite word, as defined by the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows, Sonder, I hope that in sharing of myself tonight, you can start being more attentive to those around you. This is a story about me. My name is Nala Jaden Wu. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a proud, openly queer and trans, non-binary, Southern Chinese American. For those who knew me when I was in high school or younger, you're probably hearing that entire phrase for the first time. Surprise, I am a gay and they. And if what I just said scares you for some reason, I mean, I'm not sure why, I'm literally 5 feet tall. You also might notice me looking down here. I've got ADHD, and if I don't have notes to keep me on track tonight, I will talk all night, and you don't want that. This is a story about me. I was born in 1999, and I'm 23 years old. Probably just made some of y'all feel a bit old, sorry. Meanwhile, any Gen Zers here probably are like, oh, well, your birth year starts with a 19? Okay. Well, joke's on you, because I'm technically Gen Z as well, but I don't always relate to everything our generation is known for. I wasn't born with a device in my hand, as I've often heard said. I watched VHS tapes rewind and sat on those long car rides with those giant paper maps printed on the thinnest, most rippable paper. I remember a time before everything was wireless, a time before Blu-ray, a time where if I wanted to talk to my friends on the phone, I had to dial a landline first and then talk to their parents before I could talk to them. Gen Z gets a bad rap. We are called the selfie generation, the I generation, which the I refers both to our attachment to technology and also our apparent selfishness, because how dare we ask for basic human rights? But in the words of your generations, I'll circle back to that one. This is a story about me, and I'm relatively good at following directions. The theme of tonight's stories is gratitude, which is a word I've heard thrown about my entire life. Did anyone else first learn about Thanksgiving framed where the Pilgrims and the Native Americans sat down together to eat a shared meal, and then nothing bad happened after that? I think my teachers left out some very important information that I didn't learn until much later. Gratitude, a grateful attitude. My Thanksgiving dinners began with everyone going around the table sharing something that they are grateful for. You're expected to have something that is just sappy enough to satisfy your parents while also being unique enough that you're not just repeating what the next person said. My typical table share during this most fun part of Thanksgiving was talking about how grateful I am to be adopted. This is a story about me, and when I was 8 months old, I was adopted from China. Being adopted has affected my life in a lot of ways, and if you don't know anyone who is adopted, or more importantly, know any adoptees well enough that they would have shared with you even the tip of the iceberg of issues that adoptees face throughout their lives, especially those who are internationally and or transracially adopted, then I do hope you're listening. Quick sidebar, because not everyone knows. International adoption is when you are born in one country and adopted by people who live in another country. And transracial adoptions are when a child, usually a child of color, is adopted by a family of a different ethnicity, usually white. I don't have time tonight to go into all the details of adoption trauma, like how the fear of being abandoned again had me wondering at age 4 what I possibly could have done wrong. Because it really is messed up for a kid to go through all the same things as all the other kids, except I wasn't just exploring my identity to figure out who I was and who I wanted to be, but on top of that, I was agonizing over all the questions of my past while struggling to believe I'd ever get to have a future. I was a teenager, yearning not for the bliss of young love, but for an identity to call my own, something tangible. I have lived my entire life walking a thin line between two worlds, existing as the hyphen between the words Chinese American. Not Chinese enough, because despite studying it for 14 years, I cannot speak the language of my mother's land. And yet I'm not truly American either, am I? The vitriol that my communities faced and continue to face in the wake of this ongoing pandemic only shows me that no amount of assimilation will ever get white America to fully accept us. We will always be seen as other. And yet, being able to come to America, I've been told, was a blessing. America, the land of opportunity, where anyone can become someone. I know now that it's much more complicated than that. The American dream is a sham, a hopeful delusion. But I'm lucky, they said. All it takes is hard work to make it, they said. They expected gratitude for what I was given, a gift from a God I no longer believe in. I'm sure you can imagine how confusing and disorienting this all is. Being a student at AB was hard enough, now tack on an identity crisis stretching across international borders. There's one thing to take away from my story tonight, it's that gratitude is complicated. When I actually sit down to think about it though, something I am grateful for is the internet. Before you scoff and judge me for saying that, because how Gen Z of me to do so, right? Yeah. Let me say it loud and clear. The internet quite literally has saved my life. I'm gonna rewind for a moment while I give you the spark notes on my life thus far. That is the website your kids go to avoid reading any of this stuff assigned in English class. I was abandoned at birth, just days after being born and left in a cardboard box at the gates of a middle school. I was then adopted and moved nearly 8,000 miles away from the only home I ever knew before my first birthday. In elementary school, all my friends bullied me because I was weird, and they didn't want to be friends with me anymore. But the weird that they hated so much was actually undiagnosed ADHD manifesting in neurodivergent behaviors that my peers made fun of because kids are mean, and parents weren't teaching tolerance back then like I see them do now. I was so desperate to be accepted, I changed everything about myself. I got new clothes, I listened to all the music they were listening to, but nothing was enough. Turns out looking the part does not erase one's neurodivergence. Also, on top of all of this, I realized I was queer in middle school when I developed a massive crush on one of my best friends. But I was too terrified to confess to anyone because I was worried that people wouldn't accept me. Which, if you're reading between the lines here, you will understand and know that my fear of coming out was absolutely tied to my fear of being abandoned again. Now we enter high school, and all these years of feeling lonely and friendless and like something was wrong with me resulted in, and you guessed it, depression. And yes, therapy did help. I highly recommend therapy, by the way, to anyone, regardless if you think you need it. It is a great experience. I've been going for 9 years. But what helped me even more was the communities that I found online. Communities full of people like me, fellow adoptees, other artists, nerds, people who have become my lifelong friends, who validated my special interests and helped me realize that life was worth living. I learned the language with which I described myself to you today from those earliest days. I learned about queerness, about queer history, from queer people who reassured me that I was not broken. The internet saved my life, and without it, I would not be standing here today. So sure, maybe I'm addicted to my screen. Call me and my generation lazy and entitled and self-absorbed, but I challenge you to think past that. Are we actually lazy, or do we prioritize mental health in a way that academia and capitalism disfavors? Are we entitled? Is our activism seen as disrespectful to generations of people who were raised to never challenge authority's status quo? Are we really self-absorbed, or are we documenting memories and sharing them with our friends in a way that technology has been developed to allow? Never before in human history have we been able to witness world tragedies as they're happening live from primary sources who are there, streaming gunfire and violence and other unspeakable things. Yes, the internet is dangerous, it can traumatize you, it can be incredibly addictive, but it's not only something to fear, because the people I met online saved me. There's duality in everything, even in concepts seemingly straightforward, like gratitude. I am grateful for a lot of things, even my adoption, as messy and as complicated as it is, because all this pain made me who I am today. But I also feel the weight of all of my identities as they've grown to become political talking points, discussed and debated as if I'm not a real live person standing right here, because once again, like grade school, I am othered simply for existing. I've learned that all these messy and complicated, beautiful feelings, they can all coexist. I can be grateful for the life that I lead here and for the opportunities I have, and I can still hold within me the pain from the biggest question I've been asking my entire life. Why? Why was I abandoned? I'll carry this unknown with me for the rest of my life. But what I do know is that by talking about my experiences and sharing them openly with people, I've been able to find community and connect with those for whom my story resonates on a personal level. And for everyone else who might not share my specific pains, I can only hope that you will find your own comfort and catharsis experiencing Sonder like I have, and that you go forth after tonight listening for all the untold stories, the lives around you. Woo!